vision and pay me. It's never this way. Me indigenous, maybe we winning this crazy. Opportunity, your opportunity, your opportunity, your opportunity. This your opportunity, your opportunity.
Welcome to EDI on the Streets. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we need to explicitly state for you, the listener, that this is part 2 of a 2-part series.
Yes, part 2.
If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, don't worry. You can absolutely still follow along with today's conversation, but I highly recommend going back and checking it out when you have a moment. It provides a lot of the foundational context for what we're going to dissect today.
It really does set the stage.
Right. In that first part, we talked extensively about how internal silos form within an organization. We looked deeply at the root causes, disconnected systems, manual workarounds, and the absolute operational nightmare of different teams operating with entirely conflicting versions of the exact same data. We painted a picture of what happens when your sales team is looking at one spreadsheet, your warehouse is looking at a completely different printed sheet that's been scribbled on with a Sharpie.
It was a very necessary, albeit sometimes painful, look at the problem. We really had to explore the anatomy of those silos to understand how deeply entrenched they become. We discussed how they don't usually form out of malice. I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning, drives to the office, and decides they want to hoard data just to purposely make life difficult for the warehouse manager.
Right. That's not how corporate dysfunction usually starts.
No. Silos form out of a basic human need for self-preservation. When systems are disconnected and unreliable, people build their own little data fortresses just to survive the workday without getting blamed for a catastrophe.
Just trying to cover themselves.
Exactly. They create manual workarounds because the official process is fundamentally broken. But as we established in that first part, that understandable survival mechanism ultimately fractures the organization. It creates a culture of mistrust and massive inefficiency.
Today, we are shifting our focus entirely from the problem to the solution. Today's mission is entirely focused on breaking down how something called integrated EDI actually eliminates those deeply ingrained silos.
Yes, and we're not just going to talk about the software.
Right, we're going to look at the mechanics, the processes, the daily workflows, and most importantly, the human elements of bringing an organization back together through a shared data pipeline.
And what's fascinating here is the behavioral shift that follows the technological shift. It is never just about installing a new piece of software.
Yeah.
When integrated EDI is done right, a truly incredible organic transformation happens across the entire company.
Teams stop working around each other.
It's profound. It changes the entire atmosphere of an office.
That is the perfect way to frame what we're doing today. The idea that fixing your data pipeline actually fixes your corporate culture. I want to start by deconstructing the terminology because integrated EDI is a massive buzzword. It gets thrown around constantly in marketing materials, sales pitches, and executive boardrooms. But I want to ask you to really unpack what this means technically for you, the listener.
Sure.
If we strip away the marketing jargon, what are we actually talking about when we use that phrase in the real world?
It absolutely is a buzzword, and unfortunately, it's very often used to describe systems that are barely connected at all. The definition has been totally diluted.
How so?
Well, sometimes a software vendor or even a company's internal IT department will claim they have integrated EDI simply because they can export a flat file from a third-party web portal, save it to their desktop, and then manually import it into their accounting software using some sort of mapping wizard.
Oh, wow.
That is not true integration. That is just a slightly digitized manual process.
Wait, let me stop you right there, because you just mentioned a flat file from a web portal. For someone listening who might be a business leader or an operations manager, and not necessarily a database administrator, what exactly are we talking about there, and why is that such a problem?
That is a great clarifying question. A flat file is essentially a plain text file or a basic CSV, separated values file. It holds data, but it holds it without any structural relationships. It was literally just rows and columns of text.
Right.
When companies use what we call a web-based EDI portal, they are logging into a website hosted by a third party, looking at their orders on a screen, and then clicking a button to download that data as a flat file.
And then the fun begins.
And the fun begins. They have to take that file, maybe open it in Excel, massage the data, fix any formatting issues, save it, and then try to upload it into their own system. It is incredibly brittle.
Brittle is the perfect word for it.
If a single comma is out of place, Or if a date is formatted as month, day, year instead of day, month, year, the entire upload fails. And then a human being has to spend an hour trying to figure out why the system rejected it.
Right.
True integrated EDI means your EDI infrastructure is directly and intrinsically connected to your organization's core systems at the database level.
Database level, not screen level.
Exactly. We are not talking about humans clicking download and upload. We're talking about the ERP, your enterprise resource planning system, which serves as the central brain of your business. We are talking about the WMS, your warehouse management system. We are talking about your financial workflows.
It's all talking to each other behind the scenes.
The technical reality of true integration is a seamless, programmatic flow of data, where an incoming electronic message triggers an immediate automated creation or update of a record in your core database. It uses APIs or direct database injection without a single human keystroke.
And this immediate visibility aspect is what completely changes the dynamic of a company. When an order arrives via true integrated EDI, it isn't just received in a vacuum.
No, it's alive in the system.
Right. It doesn't just sit in a customer service inbox waiting for someone to return from their lunch break.
Yeah.
Because it hits the ERP directly, it becomes instantly visible to everyone who relies on that system.
The entire company sees it.
Sales sees the new demand immediately and can track their quotas. Operations sees the allocation requirements and can adjust production schedules. The warehouse sees the picking queue update in real time. Finance sees the projected revenue for cash flow forecasting. It happens in milliseconds and it happens concurrently.
But we connect this to the bigger picture. There is a factor that is even more crucial than speed.
What's that?
The most vital aspect of this technical setup is that every single team across the entire organization is looking at the exact same version of the data. This is what we refer to as the one truth.
The one truth. I want to underline that for the listener because it sounds almost philosophical, but it is a hard operational mandate. If you don't have the one truth, what do you have?
Think about the alternative. Let's imagine a company. We'll call them Apex Dynamics. They manufacture industrial widgets. Without integrated EDI, a massive customer, let's say a national hardware chain, sends an order.
Okay, setting the scene.
It arrives as an email attachment, usually a PDF. Sarah in customer service prints it out. She sits at her desk and hand keys a 50-line order into the ERP. But she's human, she's tired, and the phone is ringing.
A recipe for disaster.
On line 42, she makes a typo on the quantity. She types 100 instead of 1,000. Or maybe the hardware chain used an old part number that Apex retired last year, and Sarah simply guesses what the new one should be based on her memory.
Oh, no.
Meanwhile, because it's a rush order, she emails a scanned copy of the original PDF directly to the warehouse manager as a heads up so they can start pulling pallets.
So already we have a fracture in reality.
A massive fracture. Now, the warehouse floor is looking at the printed PDF to pick the order, which says 1,000 units. But the ERP, which controls inventory allocation, only shows a demand for 100 units because of Sarah's typo.
The systems are out of sync immediately.
Exactly. The warehouse pulls 1,000 units, physically depleting the inventory, but the system thinks 900 of them are still sitting on the shelf. Next week, the sales team promises those 900 units to another customer, not realizing the physical shelf is actually empty.
And what about finance?
Finance tries to build a hardware chain based on the data in the ERP, so they send an invoice for 100 units. But the warehouse actually shipped 1,000 units. Apex Dynamics just gave away 900 industrial widgets for free.
Man. So what does this all mean? It means absolute chaos. It means you have multiple truths floating around the company. You have the PDF truth, the ERP truth, the physical inventory truth.
Which means you actually have no truth at all.
Exactly. You just have competing interpretations of what the customer wanted, and you spend all your profit margins paying your employees to argue in conference rooms about whose fault it is.
Precisely. Integrated EDI fundamentally removes the interpretation phase. The machine-readable data sent by the trading partner is the exact same data that populates the ERP without human translation.
That's the key. No human translation.
That is the exact same data the warehouse sees on their handheld scanners, which is the exact same data finance uses to generate the final invoice. It establishes an unshakable baseline of reality for the entire company.
An unshakable baseline of reality, because when you don't have that, you spend half your day just trying to figure out what reality is before you can even begin to do your actual job.
It's exhausting.
It is. Let's pivot and talk about the magic of a shared data pipeline, because this concept of the one truth relies entirely on how that architectural pipeline is structured.
To understand the magic, we really have to define the pipeline itself. I like to contrast the concept of a single transaction pipeline with the chaos of data bouncing unpredictably between systems.
Like a pinball machine.
Yes, without a unified pipeline, data is often passed linearly but haphazardly. Department A processes something, exports it to a spreadsheet, massages it, and emails it to Department B, adds their own data, changes the formatting, and uploads it to Department C's portal. At every single hop, the data changes shape. The context is lost. The original intent of the customer is buried under layers of internal translation.
It's exactly like a corporate game of telephone. You whisper a sentence at one end of the table, and by the time the message gets to the end of the line, it's completely garbled. Send 50 blue widgets turns into bend 15 new digits.
That is exactly what happens. A shared data pipeline, facilitated by integrated EDI, changes this entirely. The data doesn't bounce from department to department like a pinball.
So what does it do?
Instead, the data flows down a central, shared conduit, usually anchored by the ERP, acting as the master database. Every department taps into that same central conduit to do their specific job, but they do not alter the fundamental DNA of the original transaction.
They interact with it, they add status updates to it, but the core order remains perfectly intact.
Yes, exactly.
Let's construct a vivid hypothetical story to make this technical architecture really relatable, because talking about conduits and pipelines can get a bit abstract. Let's stick with our fictional company, Apex Dynamics, and walk through a single complex order life cycle.
That's a great idea.
This step-by-step walkthrough is usually the aha moment for people when they finally see how integrated EDI changes the entire game.
Let's trace it step by step. Step 1, purchase order arrives from that massive national hardware chain. For you listening, the 850 is just the standard EDI document designation for a purchase order.
But it's not a simple document.
It's really not. It contains incredibly crucial details. The exact ship-to location among thousands of stores, the required delivery window, the precise item numbers, the unit of measure, whether they want 50 individual items or 50 cases, and the exact contracted price they expect to pay.
The raw data arrives. What happens in step 2?
In step 2, this is where the system acts as a gatekeeper. Are the part numbers valid and currently active in our catalog? Is the pricing on the order correct according to the specific contract we negotiated with this hardware chain? Is the requested delivery date physically possible based on our current lead times?
It's asking all the questions a human would, but instantly.
Once it passes all those validation checks, it is mapped and pushed directly into the Apex Dynamics ERP. At that exact moment, the ERP instantly becomes the system of record. The order is live, and it is pristine.
Okay, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because you just said it's pushed directly into the ERP, untouched by human hands. But isn't that inherently dangerous? Aren't we risking automatically accepting a massively incorrect order?
That's a very fair concern.
Like, what if a buyer at the hardware chain accidentally adds an extra 0 and orders 10,000 units instead of 1,000? Without a human like Sarah eyeballing it, doesn't the system just blindly accept a catastrophic error?
That is the most common fear when companies move to automation, and it is exactly why those business rules I just mentioned are paramount. True integration isn't blind. It is highly structured.
So the system catches it.
You configure the integration layer to catch those anomalies. You set a rule that says, if an order quantity for this specific item exceeds 500 units, pause the transaction and flag it for human review.
Ah, I see.
The system catches the extra 0, stops the order from entering the ERP, and sends an alert to the account manager. The beauty is that the human is only intervening when there is a true exception, rather than mindlessly verifying the 99% of orders that are perfectly fine.
That makes perfect sense. It's management by exception. Now, before we push that data into the ERP, you also use the word mapped. For a business leader listening who relies on their IT architect for the heavy lifting, what are we actually doing when we map data?
Mapping is the translation layer. The national hardware chain sends their order using an X12 EDI standard format. It looks like lines of code separated by asterisks.
Total gibberish to most people.
Total gibberish. Your ERP cannot read that raw X12 code. It only understands its own proprietary database tables.
Right.
Mapping is the act of telling the integration software, take the data from the N1 segment of the EDI file, which contains the ship to address, and insert it specifically into the delivery address field in the ERP.
Just linking point A to point B?
You do that for every single piece of data: prices, quantities, items, dates. Once it's mapped, the translation happens invisibly and instantaneously for every subsequent order.
Excellent breakdown. So the data is validated, The order is now pristine in the ERP. Step 3. The warehouse needs to physically act on it.
Yes, the physical world takes over.
Because the systems are integrated, the warehouse isn't waiting for a printed ticket to be walked down from the front office by a stressed-out coordinator. The Warehouse Management System, or WMS, which is constantly pulling directly from the ERP, sees the new order immediately.
Instantly.
The warehouse personnel, looking at their RF scanners or tablets, are picking the goods based strictly on that centralized ERP order, not an email, not a sticky note, the exact validated data the customer transmitted.
And this leads right into step 4, which is where the physical world meets the digital world again. Once the warehouse finishes picking and packing the pallets, they scan the final barcode on the shrink wrap.
That satisfying beep.
Exactly. That physical action happening out on a noisy, busy warehouse floor automatically updates the centralized system because the system already knows exactly what was ordered and now knows exactly what was packed into which specific box on which specific pallet. It automatically generates shipment notice.
The Advanced Ship Notice, or ASN. And we really need to pause and appreciate the ASN because it is arguably the most complex document in the entire supply chain.
It absolutely is.
Why is that?
The ASN doesn't just tell the customer we shipped your stuff. It provides an incredibly granular hierarchy of data. It tells the hardware chain's receiving dock, pallet A contains box 1 and box 2. Box 1 contains 50 blue widgets. Box 2 contains 50 red widgets.
That is a lot of detail.
And it continues. Here's the tracking number for pallet A, and it will arrive at Distribution Center 4 on Tuesday at 10:00 a.m. Trying to have a human being manually type that level of hierarchical data into a web portal for a 50-pallet shipment without making a mistake is mathematically near impossible.
Yeah, that's just begging for a typo.
But because the integration captured the data at the source, the scanner on the warehouse floor, the ASN is generated perfectly and transmitted instantly.
And think about the beautiful symmetry of that workflow. The warehouse worker didn't have to call customer service and say, "Hey, Sarah, tell the hardware chain we shipped the widgets, and here is a list of what's in every box."
The physical action of simply doing their job correctly created the necessary digital communication automatically.
It's brilliant. Then we hit step 5. Finally, an 810 invoice flows out to the customer. And here is the kicker. That invoice is generated from the exact same initial data set, updated only by the confirmed shipped quantity.
If we connect this back to the bigger picture of corporate silos, why does this step-by-step flow matter so much? It matters because every single step references the exact same transaction lineage. When finance generates the 810 invoice, they aren't opening a new screen and typing in a new document based on a stack of paper. They are fundamentally finalizing the life cycle of the original purchase order that entered the system days ago. The data has a clear, unbroken digital pedigree.
Which means teams never have to reconcile different interpretations of what the customer actually ordered.
Exactly.
Finance doesn't have to look at the invoice they're trying to send, look at the warehouse's handwritten shipping log, look at the customer's original email, and try to play detective to figure out why the dollar amounts don't match.
No more data janitors.
Right. The numbers match automatically because they are all reflections of the exact same original digital object.
That's exactly right. When you lack transaction lineage, you breed absolute mistrust within an organization. Think about our fictional apex dynamics. Without lineage, finance starts to assume the warehouse always messes up the cycle counts.
And the warehouse assumes the sales team always promises things that aren't in stock just to get a commission.
Right. Sales assumes customer service is entering the orders wrong because they are incompetent. But when the lineage is mathematically undeniable, that deeply ingrained mistrust evaporates. The data is what the data is. It removes the emotion.
That is a brilliant transition into discussing visibility and the death of the intermediary, because we just talked about how this perfectly synchronized data pipeline works architecturally, but I want to talk about what it actually feels like for the human beings working in these departments.
The human experience of it.
Yes. When you have this level of integration, it completely erases internal friction.
It absolutely does. And the psychological relief for the employees is massive. When we talk about friction in an office environment, what are we really talking about? We're talking about the time, energy, and emotional toll spent simply trying to coordinate basic facts.
Just figuring out what's going on.
Exactly. It's the friction of information asymmetry,
Yeah.
where one person, say the warehouse manager, knows something, and another person, like a customer service rep, needs to know it to do their job. But the mechanism for transferring that knowledge is slow, manual, or completely broken. It creates tension, stress, and animosity.
Exactly. Let's break down exactly how this shared visibility empowers specific teams, and specifically how it empowers them without them ever needing to ask each other for updates. Let's start with customer service. Imagine Sarah at Apex Dynamics. What does her day look like with integrated EDI versus without it?
Or for customer service, integrated EDI is like turning on the floodlights in a pitch-black room.
I love that analogy.
Without it, a buyer from the hardware chain calls and says, "Sarah, where is my rush order of widgets?" Sarah feels her stomach drop. She has to say, "Let me find out." Then she emails the warehouse. The warehouse doesn't answer because they are busy driving forklifts.
Obviously.
So she puts the angry customer on hold, gets up from her desk, and physically walks out to the shipping dock to search for a specific pallet among hundreds.
A total waste of time.
With integrated visibility, that same scenario is entirely different. The customer calls. Sarah looks at her ERP screen. Because of the shared data pipeline, she can instantly see the entire life cycle of the order. She sees it was received, she sees it was acknowledged, she sees it was picked 20 minutes ago, and she sees it is currently being loaded onto a truck.
The information is simply there.
She can answer the customer's question confidently in 5 seconds without interrupting a single person on the warehouse floor.
It's the difference between being a panicked detective and being a calm, authoritative guide. She doesn't have to investigate, she just has to relay the facts. Now, what about operations? How does visibility change their world?
Operations benefits immensely from the traceability aspect. Let's say a customer claims they're going to issue a $5,000 chargeback penalty because they never received an advance ship notice, so their receiving dock wasn't prepared for the delivery.
A classic dispute.
In a siloed company, operations has to shrug, panic, and wonder if the manual upload failed or if someone forgot to click send. They usually just eat the fine.
Because they can't prove otherwise.
Exactly. But with integrated EDI, operations can trace every single message exchanged with a trading partner through the system logs. They don't have to guess.
They have the receipts.
Yes. They can look at the exact transaction log and say, actually, the 856 shipment notice was generated at 2:14 p.m., routed through VelociLink, and successfully acknowledged by your company's AS2 server with a positive 997 functional acknowledgement at 2:15 p.m.
Checkmate.
Exactly. They have total undeniable visibility into the entire operational flow, which protects the company's bottom line.
That is huge. Protecting the margins from unfair chargebacks is a massive ROI for integrated EDI. But let's look at finance. Finance is usually the department dealing with the most ambient anxiety in any company around.
Without a doubt.
They are responsible for making sure the company actually gets paid, but they are completely reliant on other departments communicating accurately to know what actually happened. You mentioned finance reconciling mismatched documents earlier. In the real world, this is usually the dreaded three-way match. Can we break down the actual mechanics of a three-way match and why it's historically been such a nightmare for finance teams?
Absolutely. The three-way match is finance's core defense mechanism against paying for things they didn't receive or billing a customer incorrectly. It involves matching 3 distinct documents: the original purchase order, the receiving report or shipping log, and the final invoice.
Sounds simple enough in theory.
In theory. In a non-integrated, siloed company, this is a nightmare. Finance receives an invoice from a supplier for $10,000. They have to find the original paper PO, which says the agreed price was $9,500.
A discrepancy right off the bat.
Then they have to find the receiving dock's logbook to make sure the physical goods actually arrived. Maybe the receiving dock wrote down 50 boxes, but the invoice says 500 units. The unit of measure is different.
So what does finance do?
Finance now has to spend hours calling the buyer to check the price discrepancy and calling the warehouse to verify how many units were in a box. It brings cash flow to a grinding halt.
And with integrated EDI?
With integrated EDI, the three-way match is essentially instantaneous and automated. We're all part of the same digital transaction lineage flowing through the same ERP. The system compares the data mathematically.
It does the matching for them.
The system knows the PO price, it knows the exact quantity the warehouse scanned upon shipping or receiving, and it knows the invoice amount. If they match perfectly, the system approves the invoice for payment or transmission automatically. Finance only intervenes if the system flags an exception, like a price being off by a few pennies. That saves so much time. Furthermore, finance has sight of shipment confirmations before they even begin invoicing. They don't have to wait for a stack of paper delivery receipts to land on their desk on a Friday afternoon. They see the physical action translate into financial data in real time.
This raises a massive point about cash flow velocity. When finance has immediate visibility into shipment confirmations, they can trigger outbound invoices immediately. The velocity of business increases dramatically.
It accelerates everything.
They aren't waiting on the internal mail cart. They see the shipment happen in the system at 2:00 p.m., and the 8:10 invoice goes out to the customer at 2:01 p.m. It's precise, it's fast, and it decreases the day's sales outstanding metric significantly.
And finally, let's look at the impact on the warehouse. The warehouse is often the blindest department in a siloed company. They only know what work they have to do when someone hands them a piece of paper.
That's a tough way to work.
With integrated visibility, the warehouse knows exactly what commitments exist without waiting for a manual heads-up. They can look at the ERP queue and see the incoming order volume in real time for the entire week.
So they can actually plan ahead.
They can proactively plan their staffing. Maybe they need to authorize overtime for Thursday based on the inbound EDI volume and require delivery dates rather than a floor manager's best guess. It changes them from a reactive department to a strategic, proactive department.
What you are describing across all these departments, customer service, operations, finance, the warehouse, leads to a profound cultural shift. It completely eliminates one of the most dreaded, efficiency-killing, morale-destroying phrases in the entire corporate world. Let me check with another department and get back to you.
It is a massive drain on productivity. Every single time an employee says, "Let me check and get back to you," it represents a total pause in business momentum.
A dead stop.
It represents a delay and a degraded experience for the customer. It represents an interruption for the colleague who is about to be hunted down and asked for the information. And it represents a context switch for the employee who now has to remember to follow up later.
When you implement a shared pipeline that eliminates the need for that phrase, you give your company countless hours of productivity back every single week.
You truly do.
And here is an underrated benefit that we absolutely have to talk about: accountability. When you have humans acting as manual routers, accountability is incredibly messy. If an order is entered wrong and the wrong product ships, who did it?
It's impossible to know for sure.
Was it Sarah, the customer service rep, who typed it incorrectly? Was the customer's original email unclear? Did the warehouse guy read the printout wrong because the printer ink was smudged? It turns into a massive toxic witch hunt.
A blame game.
But because integrated EDI data is shared and automated, the timeline of events becomes mathematically clear.
This is where system logs become incredibly valuable. And I want to be clear, system logs aren't about building a surveillance state to punish employees. They serve as the ultimate undeniable source of objective truth.
The facts.
The facts. The system tracks exactly when a document arrived down to the millisecond. It tracks when it was validated. It tracks when it was mapped. It tracks exactly when it was accepted or rejected by the trading partner system. And it tracks exactly when it triggered downstream actions in your own ERP. What's truly fascinating here is how the supreme transparency actually removes finger pointing and heals fractured relationships.
How so?
When things go wrong, and in complex global supply chains, anomalies and edge cases will always occur, the natural human instinct in a siloed company is defensive. You protect your own department. You blame the other guy.
The warehouse lost the order.
Right. Or sales put in the wrong price to get the deal. But when you have mathematically clear, objective system logs, you can't blame another department unfairly. The evidence is right there on the screen for everyone to see.
So if you can't point fingers, how does that change the dynamic in a meeting when something breaks? It means the energy dramatically shifts. If you literally cannot waste an hour of a management meeting arguing about whose fault an error is, you skip the arguing phase entirely.
You get right to the fix.
The energy naturally shifts from the blame game to actual constructive problem solving. You look at the log, you see exactly where the failure occurred. For example, maybe a new validation rule rejected a perfectly good item number because the catalog wasn't updated, and you fix the root cause.
Exactly. It completely depersonalizes the conflict. It is no longer Bob in accounting messed up the invoicing again. It becomes the specific mapping translation rule for this particular supplier's N1 segment needs to be updated to account for their new warehouse location.
It's about the process, not the person.
It takes the emotion, the ego, and the defensiveness out of data errors, which is incredibly healthy for a corporate culture.
Which is the absolute perfect bridge to our final topic: how silos actually disappear. We've talked extensively about the technical architecture. We've broken down the 850s and 856s. We've talked about the mathematical certainty of the logs. But let's talk about the human behavioral change that happens once teams realize the data is actually reliable. This is the cultural impact, which is the ultimate goal.
The turning point for any organization undergoing this shift always comes down to trust. Specifically, trusting the pipeline. And it doesn't happen overnight.
No, change is hard.
For a long time, after a new, beautifully integrated system is implemented, employees will still harbor deep suspicion. They've been burned by bad data, crashed systems, and broken promises for so long that they simply do not immediately believe the new system is actually going to work. They keep their guard up.
They're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
But over time, as the integrated EDI proves itself, as the data flows cleanly and accurately day after day, week after week, that trust slowly builds.
And when that trust finally sets in, you witness a massive behavioral shift. You see the end of what I love to call shadow processes, or shadow IT. This is one of the most fascinating phenomena in corporate America.
Oh, shadow IT is everywhere.
Let's give you, our listeners, some specific, relatable examples of what people stop doing once integrated EDI is trusted. Because what they stop doing is just as important, if not more so, than what they start doing.
Let's start with customer service again. Once they genuinely trust the pipeline, customer service finally abandons their secret backup spreadsheets.
The safety blanket.
We see this all the time when we go in to assess a company. A customer service team will have a massive, complex, color-coded Excel spreadsheet living on a shared drive where they manually log every single order they receive, along with its status, just in case the main ERP system loses it or the warehouse claims they never got the ticket. It is purely a defensive mechanism.
It is entirely a psychological safety blanket, just so they have ammunition when a dispute inevitably arises. They're doing double the work out of fear.
But when they finally trust the integrated EDI, when they see that the ERP is an unshakable baseline of reality, that massive spreadsheet goes straight in the digital trash.
It's liberating.
They realize the ERP is accurate, and they stop duplicating effort out of self-defense. Then look at operations. Operations stops manually double-checking orders. They stop feeling the overwhelming need to randomly spot-check the data entry of the sales team or the customer service team, because they know the data came straight from the customer system via EDI without human alteration.
They can finally manage by exception rather than painstakingly auditing every single transaction that flows through the building. And finance. We talked about the three-way match earlier. Imagine the profound relief of a finance team that no longer has to play matching games with crinkled purchase orders, coffee-stained shipping receipts, and digital invoices.
It's a game changer for them.
Because the three-way match becomes mathematically automatic, because the system inherently knows that the data lineage aligns finance can stop acting as data janitors. They stop wasting time reconciling mismatched documents.
And finally, the warehouse. The warehouse stops being the default scapegoat for upstream data entry errors. Historically, because the warehouse is the last physical touchpoint before the product leaves the building, they catch all the blame.
Always.
When the warehouse knows that the pick list generated by their WMS is a mathematically perfect reflection of the customer's original EDI order, they can do their physically demanding jobs with absolute confidence.
Right.
If a customer calls and complains they got 50 red widgets instead of 50 blue widgets, the warehouse can confidently point to the system log and say, "We picked exactly what was transmitted on the 850 PO." The blame stops unfairly falling on the people physically moving the boxes.
If we take a step back and look at this cultural shift, it ties everything together perfectly. We hear the term digital transformation thrown around constantly in business media. It's another one of those massive, nebulous buzzwords. But what you are describing here isn't just a technical upgrade.
This is a fundamental cultural transformation. True digital transformation is never just about the technology itself. The technology is merely the silent enabler. The actual transformation is what happens to the human beings utilizing it.
They get their time back.
Exactly. When teams spend significantly less time verifying basic information, less time defending themselves in meetings, and less time maintaining elaborate shadow processes out of fear, they suddenly find themselves with a massive surplus of time, operational bandwidth, and mental energy.
And what do they do with that newfound energy? That's where the magic happens. They spend more time solving actual, complex business problems. Sarah, in customer service, spends her time proactively servicing the customer, building strong relationships, anticipating their needs, and upselling new product lines, instead of acting as a private investigator tracking down lost pallets.
Operations looks for strategic ways to optimize freight routes and negotiate better carrier rates instead of tracing lost AS2 messages. Finance focuses on strategic cash flow forecasting, capital allocation, and profitability analysis instead of hunting down missing paper invoices.
And that, ultimately, is the true promise of digital transformation.
It really is. It is about elevating the human workforce. Integrated EDI handles the robotic, repetitive, high-volume data movement perfectly and tirelessly, so that the human beings can do what human beings actually do best. Think critically, build empathetic relationships, innovate, and solve complex, novel problems that a machine cannot.
It is incredibly inspiring when you frame it that way. It really shifts the entire perspective from EDI as a boring, necessary technical requirement for compliance to integrated EDI as the foundational bedrock of a healthy, productive, and collaborative corporate culture. And I think that brings us beautifully to the conclusion of our analysis. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, and really across this entire two-part series. Let's quickly recap the journey we've taken you on. If part one was all about how internal silos form, how fear, bad disconnected systems, and human self-preservation cause teams to build defensive walls around their data,
Then part two has conclusively proven that integrated EDI is exactly how those silos are dismantled. By connecting systems at a fundamental, architectural level and establishing a single source of truth, you eliminate the psychological and operational need for those walls.
you ultimately connect teams. You take people who used to view each other as adversaries or obstacles to getting their jobs done, and you turn them into aligned collaborators operating from a shared baseline of reality, so that the entire operation, from the exact millisecond a purchase order arrives to the moment the final invoice is paid, can move as one cohesive, efficient unit.
Is a powerful realization, and it fundamentally changes how businesses operate. And it is exactly what we are so deeply passionate about helping organizations achieve every single day in our work at GraceBlood.
Absolutely. Well, that is going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much for joining us and exploring the incredibly real-world impact of integrated systems beyond just the technical specifications. We deeply appreciate you spending your time with us here on EDI on the Street, and we will see you next time.
Maybe we winning this crazy. Your opportunity, your opportunity, your opportunity, it's your opportunity, your opportunity.